What's up, everybody? It's Brian Trippe. Welcome to another episode of the UltraAF podcast. Super excited to bring you this week's episode with the Speed Goat, the legend himself, Mr. Karl Meltzer. Super excited to do this interview. He was just an incredible, humble, down-to-earth person. I sent him a message. He quickly replied and said, let's do it. And I got to spend about an hour, a little less than an hour and a half with Karl, and he's recovering from his most recent race. But he's got big plans for 2024, and we talk about some of those big plans he's got. We talk about, what kind of led him up to where he is today. And he's got, obviously he's done, he's the legend, right? He's done so much stuff. He holds the record for the most 100-mile trail wins on Earth. He currently has 35, at least according to his online bio. And one thing he said is his big goal, his next big achievement that he's really trying to work on right now and work towards is doing 100-mile races. And I think he said he's 18 short of that. So that's his big thing, and that he's working towards. And he's got a full schedule for 2024. So I was super excited to talk with him, and hope you guys enjoy the interview with the Speed Goat himself, Karl Meltzer. First, I want to start by saying, I've got the Speed Goats.
Fine selection.
I've got the fives. I had the fours. I like the fives way better.
Yeah, I do as well. The fives are a little more they're just a little more comfy than the fours, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I might have gotten like a half size too big. That might have been another issue with the fours. Fives are perfect. I ran the entire Pinhoti 100 in the fives.
Nice.
So thank you for all the work you do for the community, and thank you for the shoes. They're awesome.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's awesome. It's always good to hear people using them, and I see them all over the place. It's pretty crazy. It's like an honor,
Yeah. Well, there's so many different directions I can go with this. I'm going to try to respect your time and not keep you here forever, but just general thoughts on ultra running. When you got started doing this, I don't even know was it even considered ultra running? Can you remember back that far? What was it when you first got going doing this? I know you were doing cross country and in school and stuff,
right?
But when did it become ultra running for you?
Well, ultra running for me was 96 was my first race. It was Wasatch 100. I mean, like you said, like when I was in high school, I ran cross country, which was my better discipline more than being on the track. So I really enjoyed the woods more, old New Hampshire boy. But when I moved to Utah in 89, I was there to be a ski bum. And, that was awesome. And I ski bummed until 2007. But the summers, I took a lot of my time just running around the mountains in Utah. And it was, long story short, I sort of just developed into realizing that I wanted to be in the mountains more and run around, and then ultra running, it was called ultra running then. I think ultra running, like the beginning of the sport itself, if you go way back, the guys in the late 70s would call it ultra running too. The Park Barners, I can't remember too many names at that time, but for me, when it started, that's where I knew I kind of found my niche, like what I was best at. I was always pretty good at cross country, but I was better at longer distances, and through the woods and dealing with issues that we all have with ultras. So I kind of found like that, and eventually found the 100-mile distance was really my strength. So, it's crazy to hear now it's 2024 and I started this in 96, right? So we're talking almost 30-year career. And I turned, you call it pro in 99, but that really was, I don't know if you really call it pro because you're really getting free shoes isn't really pro. It's really just kind of sponsorship and a little help from companies, which was Montreal at the beginning. But, it's been an amazing ride. I've been able to keep myself going by mostly listening to my body and kind of living life to the fullest as much as I can. And I'm thankful that I'm still able to do it. It's crazy that I'm still doing it. A lot of people will say that, but if you love something a lot and you just love doing it, it's pretty easy to keep going.
Yeah. Just looking back on, I guess the ultra running, and I'm sure I'm really new to this in the scheme of things, but just looking back on it, it unless you're in it, it seems like it's something that really doesn't even exist. I mean,
Right.
I only heard it. You go to a marathon. That's that's as much as it goes to. That's the longest distance it really goes to. And when did it kind of get on your radar that I can run more than just a marathon? Or I don't even know if you ran marathons, but I can run
Right.
more than just this. I can run longer distances. And when did you first start attempting?
Right. So my first marathon, I always ran my whole life. I've run, but my first, like, same thing with me. Marathon was the ultimate distance was far. Never heard of the 100 miler. What the hell is that? Like, who would want to do that? Why would I? The typical comment, why I can't drive that far comment. But what got me into the 100 is my first marathon was St. George in Utah, and I ran 2:48. My goal was to break 3 hours. So that was, great. On training basically in the mountains too. I really didn't run on the roads. I think I did one 15 miler on the road with a buddy before that race. So I really wasn't like training for a marathon on the road per se, um, but that quickly graduated to like, what's next? Like, I hurt so much after that marathon. I couldn't move for like a week. My quads were so sore. But I kind of found out about like the Pikes Peak ascent race, which I was always a fast ascender running around Snowbird, Utah and stuff. And, you know, the Pikes Peak Marathon, you go up the marathon, up to the top and then back down. So, 13 miles up, 8,000 foot climb, and then you run back down the same trail. And my first 2 years there, I ran just the ascent race. Like, why would I run the marathon down? That's going to hurt. But then I did it, and I was like, wow, this is cool. And then moving forward to like, where did the 100 miler come from? Well, I kind of first learned about it from a coworker of mine at the Keyhole restaurant at Snowbird. Her name was Meg Gates. Her husband is Rick Gates, and Rick had run the Wasatch 100. At that time, I think he had about 10 finishes or something. And she told me about it, and I was just like, why would I want to run 100 miles? Like, that's ridiculous. But she's like, oh yeah, she talked to my husband Rick, and see what he says. Rick was pretty solid. He was kind of a upper mid packer kind of guy. Ran around the mountains a lot. I always saw him running around. I just never really realized what he was really training for. And Meg, talked to Rick, and I talked to Rick a little about it, and he sort of mentored me a little bit. Gave me a few tips on running and stuff. And I'm like, oh, what the hell, I'll enter. And I entered, and of course I had no idea what I was doing. I threw 6 of those block solid power bars into my pack and off I went, right? I only ate like half one of those stupid things. But at any rate, I did it, and I've always had the no quit attitude in me. The goal was just to finish the race. It wasn't about, running to win or running fast or have a goal time or anything like that. It was really just about finishing. And when I started that race, I was winning smaller races around Utah and stuff like that. So I was pretty fast. So a rookie going into a 100 miler, I ran with the leaders and got into mile 39 on that race, and I was running with the leader, and his name was Tim Spence, and he went on to win the race. I went on to blow up, but I finished. I finished the last 25 miles was pretty much a death march, but I did finish. And when I finished the race, of course, I said, I'll never do that again. 2 days later, I'm like, where do I sign up? And I sort of got that bug, like, wow, like it's so painful when you're out there doing it, late in the race, you're so sore. But when the pain subsides, you look back and say, well, how can I improve on that? That's just kind of how I am.
Mm.
And I went back the next year. I came in 7th, and I ran 23 plus hours. And then the following year I won in 98 and broke the record. So I was sort of figuring it out a little bit. You figure
Mm-hmm.
out the nutrition, what works for you, what doesn't. I had no idea what salt meant on the on the aid station tables, things like that. But I learned, I'm always the kind of guy that learns the hard way. So I'll do something and I'll fail for whatever reason sometimes, and then I'll go back and get it better. And I really found after 98, when I won and broke the record that year, I'm like, wow, I wonder if I can make a living at this, because I really don't want to. I'm tired of bartending already. And I didn't want to you can't be a ski bum all your life. I mean, you can, but you're not going to really, you're going to be a ski bum. You're going to ski a lot of powder, but it doesn't really get you what I have now. So, um, a couple years passed. I kept going into Wasatch every year, and then I found out a harder race. I was always good at hard stuff, so I found out about Hard Rock and stuff. And again, I learned the hard way at Hard Rock. In '99, I ran the race. I signed up in June, which is kind of crazy because now it's like there's a lottery with thousands of people.
Mm.
But I ran that race. I led the race early, and everybody thought I was going too fast. Blah blah blah, and I'll get all the way to mile 92, and I get passed by a guy named Blake Wood, who's Blake is on the board there, and he's finished the race just about every year. He's amazing, but he passed me, and I ended up dropping out. So I kind of learned the hard way once again, right? My body was destroyed. I couldn't walk. It was just so Hard Rock's a tough race. And then the following year, I was actually injured and couldn't run Hard Rock. I had a bulging disc in my back in June, so I couldn't run. But the following year, 2021, I went back and I went in the same direction. Hard Rock changes direction every year. And then I won that year and broke the record by 3 hours. And that sort of opened a few doors for me. I randomly got hooked up with Red Bull, which was an amazing company for any sport that you run. If you're connected with Red Bull, you're connected with a company that will support you 150%. It's
Wow.
pretty incredible. Yeah, I mean, if you need something, sure, here you go. Like there is no budget. I mean, there is, but it's not, but it's different. It's the level of support is really pretty incredible. So I've got hooked up with Red Bull, and that started to make things a little easier for me, a little easier to travel, made a little money. Not, believe me, it wasn't very much money, but it was a little bit. And Montreal supported me a little bit, and so it became better. And as the early 2000s went along, I would bartend all winter, save as much money as I could so I could run as much in the summer. So I was kind of more of a running bum than a ski bum at that point.
Yeah.
Uh, I just started racing, started winning a lot, and boom, um, here we are.
It appears, well, first of all, a 2:48 marathon. That's
Not
that's,
bad.
that's pretty incredible. I aspire to be sub three. I'm 44. I aspire to be sub three,
Yeah.
hopefully one day. But it seems as if you had a lot of success early. And yeah, you kind
Mm-hmm.
of had to learn your way over the, a couple of years, but you won a race somewhat early.
Yeah.
Do you ever think back, what if you hadn't had the success as far as like finishing first? Do you feel like you'd still be doing this?
Um, I think so. I mean, if I say I never won a 100 miler, I was just kind of I don't know if recreational runner is the right word, but just being out there. I mean,
Hmm.
those are the lifeblood of the sport, really, right?
Hmm.
Um, I mean, like I'll say, winning never gets old. I mean, you win one, and you're like, well, I can win again. I can win
Right.
again, and it's very cool. It's very exciting to win a race. Even no matter who you beat or how slow or fast it is, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That definitely would inspire me to say, hey, I can make a living at this. If I hadn't moved to Utah and I stayed in New Hampshire, I honestly have no clue what would have really transpired. I probably would have moved to Vermont or something or northern New Hampshire, but I really don't. It's hard to say whether or not ultra running really would have been part of my life. But when you win something like that and you say, well, can I make a living out of this? And then that Red Bull thing comes along and all that, a lot of stuff has happened to me randomly. Red Bull was one of them for sure. And, it's like I just made it work. I made it
Mm.
work and to be pro at something. I never made a lot of money. I
Mm.
still don't. I mean, from an athlete perspective, you know, even nowadays, the very, very top runners aren't getting these, $1 million salaries. I mean, people we're able to like run and travel and to go to races and things like that and sort of not have another job, but most of us still have other jobs. I coach
Mm.
people, and stuff. And um it's not a lucrative sport where you're going to make money. And you said, it's still sort of off the radar sport, and it still is because it's getting bigger with the UTMB World Series and all these other big races and things, but it's hard to watch on TV, right? Like in this country, football, football, get it. I personally don't like watching football. Maybe I'm an anomaly, but to me it's boring. And I can watch running all day long. But the fans of running are actually runners. The fans of
Right.
football aren't necessarily football players,
Right.
right? So So that's where the sport is. It's not, it's definitely growing. People like to be outside. Um, but you still have a really hard time watching it on TV. And it's not for the armchair athlete, and watching a 100 miler, obviously I mean, that's tough. The
Yeah.
only race you can really watch at a 100 miler is UTMB, where I'm not sure if you saw it, but I was in French 2 years ago, and French TV, it's pretty much Phil Lake and Bob Roll at the Tour de France watching UTMB. I mean, it's really, really good coverage. um, it's kind of exciting actually, because if you've ever watched Tour de France,
Mm-hmm.
those two guys are amazing. Listening to them talk is amazing, right? So the sport is, it's growing and stuff like that. But will it ever be football? No, it won't be.
Wow.
But it's what people that do it. It's like I said, the middle of the pack is the life, or the whole pack is the lifeblood of the sport. And we're really out there to do it, and we help each other, we cheer on each other, and that's what really makes it a special thing to do. I mean, being able to make a living at it is rare. I don't think there's too many guys out there that are just running.
Mm.
Even elite marathoners. Like in the U.S., a Galen Rupp, for instance. I'm sure he's doing fine, but how many guys are Galen Rupp?
Right.
Obviously, there's a million Kenyans that can run that fast, but it's just been really cool for me to say, hey, I made a living out of this. Now I'm 56, and I'm not going to retire from running a race. I mean, I still enjoy being out there, even if it's a little slower.
Yeah.
So I'll keep doing it until I just feel like it's time to stop, or my body tells me it's time to stop. But at that point, I'm not really there yet. So I'm just going to keep doing it and see what transpires.
Well, I mean, you mentioned just kind of maybe the casual person. So I asked you that question. If you didn't win, would you still be doing it? Probably, because you love running.
Yeah.
You've been running for
Yeah.
so long. There, it is the lifeblood of the sport. All these kind of weekend warriors, the people that just feel like, this is just something I do. I do it. I started doing it just for therapy, just hiking,
Right.
just to kind of get my mind right and try to get some peace in my mind. And it just turned into this. And I'm not on your level by any stretch, but my question would be, what would it take to get on your level, Karl? Do you feel like do you feel like an elite athlete? A, and then B, is it just a whole lot of running and a whole lot of training that's gotten you to this point, or is there a magic formula there?
Well, I mean, I don't think you can deny the fact that genetics have something to do with it. Um, I'm not going to say I come from this amazing gene pool, not hardly, but yes, I'm not an elite athlete anymore. I'm not at that level because I'm just older and slower. But sure, I was certainly an elite at the top of my game from 2000 till kind of 2015, 2018 even. You don't have to be in your 20s to run a fast 100. Like I said, my niche was the 100. So in order to get good at it, um, we all have our limitations. Like I said, genetics is going to play a part in it. It's just the bottom line. You can't fight that. But to be good at it, you have to learn about efficiency and how can I maximize what I get out of my body, right? I mean, for someone that might be finishing Wasatch in 36 hours, and for some people like myself might be breaking 20 hours there. It's just that, but it is really basically a whole lot of running. Not overdoing it. I'm not a 100 mile a week guy. I run 55, 60 miles a week in my
Mm,
peak weeks. Plenty of vertical gain, because
mm,
I'm mountains, but at the same time, I don't get real technical with my training. I get out every day for the most part, until I'm too tired, then I'll take a day off and I listen to my body really well. And then I always practice the efficiency tools of like how to run your best 100. A great example of that was just this past weekend when I won Love It, right? The Love It 100. I was in second place the entire day, just doing my own thing. I didn't focus on who was leading, what he was doing in front of me. I just did my own thing. And every time I caught up to, his name was Josh. Every time I caught up to Josh, he was sitting in the chair at the aid station, right? I would go to the aid station. I'd fill my one water bottle. I'd fill the other bottle half full of Coca-Cola and move on, right? So I'd stop for 30 seconds. He'd stop for whatever time he was ahead of me. Every time I left, he would either follow me or jump out right before me or something. And so he probably had I won by like 40 minutes or something like that. that was probably, he probably had more downtime than 40 minutes than I did, you know. So I maximized my efficiency
Mm,
to win that race. I mean, it was his first 100, so you know he did awesome. He did fantastic. But at the same time, I just try to practice the best efficiency, get the most out of my body, and you know, for others to get at the elite level, um, all you can do is train your best and you know try to stay consistent and try to stay healthy. You
yeah.
know, a lot of times having I coach a lot. I've coached a lot of people over the years. I started in 2008, so I've had
Mm,
almost 20, you know, 15 years of experience coaching. And the majority of people always want to say, "Hey, well, I need to do speed work to get good at the 100. I got to do speed work, speed work, speed work," because their background is generally the 10K, the you know the 20K or whatever, the half marathon, maybe the marathon. Truthfully, in a mountain 100, you don't even really need to do any speed work. um, you need to just be consistent and stay healthy all the time, so you can keep jogging after mile 60.
mhm,
Because the majority of that middle of the pack, they'll do some jogging early and all that. They get to mile 60, you're walking all the way to the finish line. And when you start walking, the clock really starts moving fast.
mhm,
And you lose a ton of time.
mhm.
I've always said the race starts at mile 70 in 100. And I mean, that was very truthful this weekend too. But if you're able to jog late in the race and, you know, keep your nutrition okay, everything's going okay, you're going to gain a ton of time relative to the field. And that's where you maximize your that PR time or whatever.
Mm.
It doesn't come in the early part of the race. One guy at Love was classic. It was just a classic scene this this weekend. One guy went off the start line, off he went. You know, we dropped at mile 30. We passed him at mile 20 or so, and he wasn't looking so good. So it has nothing to do with, it doesn't have nothing to do with speed, but most of it really doesn't have to do with speed. It's about how can you manage your time and your efficiency throughout the whole race. You know, you have to be very consistent. You're always going to be slower the second half. It just happens because your gait gets slower, you get sore. But but if your second half is like for me this last weekend, it was about 9:30 at 50, and then 11:10 was the second half. That's pretty good ratio, you know. I mean, hour and a half slower second half, that's solid. And this course is harder the second half. So that was really pretty smart running. And that's really the reason I kind of maximize what I have left in me, you know.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's funny you say that because, you know, I just did my first 100 back in
Nice.
November, and I know
Yeah.
you've done the Pinhoti 100 a
Yeah, it's a
couple of
great race.
times.
Great
And
race.
so, and that's my home. I'm in Alabama. I live in Alabama. That's my
Yeah.
kind of my home Pinhoti Trail. I've through hiked it many times. Love it.
Awesome.
But that last 5 miles, I had a and I was walking. You know,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
feet were all blistered up. I'd never done
Yeah.
100 before. I'd never done more than 40 before
Right.
at one time. Well, I had a pacer with me, and she had just started with me. You know, she's fresh. It was the next morning already. It was like six
Yeah.
o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
and she goes, "Why are we walking?" I'm like, "Well, I'm in a lot of pain
Well, let
here."
me tell you something.
And so we just keep kind of talking about it a little bit, and she's like, "Well, can you try to jog?" I'm like, maybe. I feel like I kind of convinced myself that I should be walking because I was hurting so bad.
Right.
I started just barely jogging,
Yeah.
and then just she started out in front of me, and just she kept picking up the pace just a little bit at a time, and I just kind of
Yeah.
followed her. And the last 4 miles, I ran at 11-minute miles, which I'm
Nice.
not breaking any world
No,
records.
that's great.
But here's the crazy thing: is to your point, I passed 18. I counted. I passed 18 people
Boom.
in the last 4 miles because
Yeah,
everyone's walking.
that's right. And that's you know, I say too, a slow jog is better than no jog, right? That is so that's a classic example you just said right there. 18 people you passed, right? 18 people because you were slowly jogging. I mean,
Yeah,
11 minute mile is impressive at the last bit. That's really good. And I know the course, you know, I know exactly where it was like. It's just trail. I mean, for the most
yeah,
part, let's jump on the road, but still 11-minute miles great at the end. And that's like I say, you know, race starts at mile 70. If you're still jogging, you swallow people up, or you bury them behind you. If you're racing someone so fast, you're out of sight so fast,
yeah.
it's crazy because you're walking, you know, having done the AT a number of times, I'm very in tune with like what my pace is. I mean, I've got a Casio watch. I don't use any fancy gadgets or
Wow.
anything. Yeah, oh yeah, I don't use a regular watch, just a Casio. But I can tell, I know how fast I'm going, you know. When I was on the AT, my average pace throughout the whole AT was 3.4 miles an hour, right? That's on the AT, that's about as fast as you can walk without it being uncomfortable,
Mm.
like weird feeling. So, um,
That's
but
about what, 16-minute miles or so?
yeah, yeah, 17 even
17,
17,
yeah.
So, if you're running, if instead of you're running 11 instead of 17, that's 6 minutes every mile. That's huge.
Yeah.
So you make a ton of time by being able to jog late in the race. And that's sort of why I gravitated towards the 100 because I like that,
Mm.
not really come from behind feeling, but it's inspiring when you're passing. You don't want to be the hunted, you want to be the hunter, right? That's how you finish strong.
Yeah. Well, Carl, I want to ask you about, I don't want to, you told me only one topic was off limits. So
Yeah,
I'm going to take you at your word. I want to ask you about something. I don't know how comfortable or uncomfortable this might be, but I want to ask you about David Goggins, if you don't mind.
yeah, yeah. Go for it.
I, I'd never heard of you before until I read his first book.
Mm-hmm.
And he's sitting here talking. I'd never even heard of ultra running before. And I was, just real quickly, just share a little bit about me. I was a mindset guy in real estate, teaching other people how to do real estate, a kind of a real estate trainer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read tons of stuff on mindset. Someone handed me the book. You got to read this. It wasn't really athletically, it wasn't really my thing, but the mindset stuff of what it takes to achieve, I ate it up. Well, I ended up going through a traumatic divorce, and that's really what kind of led me to try to find peace through just kind of hiking through trails and finding this running thing, and then I start revisiting this book and really starting to pay attention to it. And your name comes up, first time I'd ever heard of you,
Yeah.
and and I'm sure you've read the book or at least you've
I
heard
haven't
about.
read the book actually,
You
but
ever
no, but it's up.
have
But
you?
I know David. Go ahead, continue. Go ahead.
Well, so I'm surely you've heard about the parts that you're mentioned where
Yeah, yeah,
he sees you at the Hurt 100,
yeah.
and you end up lapping him,
Mm-hmm.
and you look like this little, you're just barely touching the ground. It looks like you're floating on clouds, is kind of what he says in the book. Just your overall reaction to that. Surely you've heard about it at the very
Yeah, yeah.
least.
Yeah, no, I've heard about all of it. Yeah, I haven't read the book, but yeah, I've heard about the times like you mentioned the Hurt 100, and that race is. I don't know if you probably haven't been over there,
No,
but
no.
so I met David first at Hurt 100. Help me on the year, 2002 or three or something.
Six? I think he said six.
Okay, it might have been six. Yeah, it was six actually. Okay, so I don't know. I don't think I actually technically met him there, but that trail is super gnarly. It's really rooty and slippery, and which
Mm,
is kind of my forte. It's what I'm best at.
mm,
And and yeah, I remember, the funniest thing about this race, you probably don't know this part. He didn't mention it, but there was a guy named Akabil Mohamed or something that offered $1,000 to anybody who could break 24 hours. And because no one had done it at that point, and it was like no one's ever going to break 24, and I was like, I'll break it. He paid me the $1,000, and I ran 22. But 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 regardless, yeah, I met David there after the race and stuff, and I did. He mentioned to be floating over the rocks, and it's a classic quote by Scott Jurek too. He's like, someone asked Scott Jurek one time, what would be your favorite thing to be able to do if that was kind of not real? And he said, I'd love to be able to levitate through the woods. And so David sort of described me as levitating somewhat, in the clouds and stuff through the woods. But David is a great person. He's very motivating. The only thing I don't like about David is his vulgarity is a little bit over the top, but at the same time, that still motivates people. And
mm,
so he's done so much for the sport in terms of motivating and bringing people into the sport. So for that, I commend him. It's been great. I think the next race that I ran with David might have been the San Diego 100,
mm-hmm.
and we ran at just the very beginning. He was better. He was better then. He was a little faster then. We chatted for a little bit, and I met him also at the McNaughton. He was running the McNaughton 200. I ran the 100. We chatted with him and his girlfriend at the time. I forgot her name, but he was with where he is now. What he's done is incredible. Where he
Mm,
was then, he was when he was chatting with me. He sort of looked up to me, which I
mm,
felt. I'm not really uncomfortable with that feeling, but I was like, wow, this guy thinks I'm some superstar, and I'm just a guy running around the woods, But no, David has done amazing things for the sport of ultra running, and again, not even just ultra running, just for motivation.
Yeah.
Um, he's he's a pretty incredible person. The story behind his whole life.
Yeah.
He was, 300 something pounds or whatever. He lost all this weight, the Navy SEAL thing, all of that stuff. When I heard about the Navy SEAL stuff, I was like, geesh, no wonder he's a house.
Yeah.
I mean, the man can pick me up and toss me into the river pretty easily, right? But no, he's done a lot for the sport, and he's done a lot of very good things. So I mean, I'm happy to see that he's doing very well for himself.
It's funny how you describe him. I think he describes himself in that first book. He described himself as like a linebacker,
Yeah.
basically out there with a bunch of college professor looking guys.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, he was the biggest guy in the field for sure.
What is? I mean, he put all this in the book, but he mentioned that he felt out of place. He looked out of place and he felt out of place. Did you see that? Did you see like this person's completely out of place, or you just weren't really thinking about that?
um, I don't know if I was really thinking about that. Because if you look at ultra runners, I mean, my wife has finished a few hundreds, okay, and so
Hmm.
she does not look like a runner. She's not built like a runner, but she's done it, right? You go at any 100-mile race in the back of the pack. Not all those people look like runners, not at all.
Right.
A lot don't really, but they're strong mentally and they can do it. Um, David, yeah, he was probably a little bit out of place, like just because he has a strong upper body. Most runners, like I have nothing on my upper body. I weigh nothing. I weigh 140 pounds. I'm 5'10". David was a much stronger guy, but so my theory was like, well, I can beat him. He's too big, um, because that's kind of just the smaller people usually win. But no, I don't know if I didn't notice that he sort of felt out of place. That's I kind of odd hearing you say that, but I mean, it's runners are generally smaller people. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
when someone first saw him, they're like, wow, who's that guy? But he's just another guy out there running through the woods just like we are. He's
Yeah.
no different. Nobody's any different than anyone else as far as I'm
Right.
concerned. We're all the
Yeah.
same. Um, so yeah, it's David is who he is. Everyone's got their own gig.
Yeah. So you said 5'10", 140
Yep.
is so I'm 5'8" and I'm 175.
Yep.
And I'm trying to figure out, and maybe you coach a lot of athletes or a lot of
Mhm.
aspiring runners. I'm trying to a lot of the trail runners I've seen, they've got some weight on them. I'm not saying they're not obese or not fat,
Yeah.
but they're
Yeah.
not 5'10", 140. They've
Right.
got a lot more weight on them. What do you feel like? And I know everyone's different, and I get that. Everyone's body's going to react differently. But why are you that weight? Is that a comfortable weight for you? Do you feel like you run better at that weight? Is that just how it's always been? Or do you find the if you were 160 or 175, that would just be you wouldn't be able to have the success you do?
I would be fat at 160. In my mind,
I was about to
right?
say, not according to like the charts and
Yeah,
stuff.
the charts don't mean shit. It's all
Okay.
like I go back goes back to the genetics, right? I've always been a skinny person, so that's how I'm built.
Mm,
Everyone's built a certain way. I'm very comfortable at 140 pounds.
mm,
I didn't. The most I have ever weighed in my entire life was 158, and that was about a month after I did the AT because I kept eating like I was on the AT and I wasn't running. And I did. I felt sluggish. I felt
mm,
slow. I felt, I mean, fat's the right word, but I sort of felt fat, like for
mm.
me, I had more, it was mostly my belly, like my upper body. And, my wife said she could see it in my face a little bit, but that's what happens when you gain weight. But
Sure.
um, it's just comfortable for me. My best race weight is between 140, 145. It's just how I am. I can eat, I eat to sustain. I don't,
Mm,
I'm not a breakfast, lunch, dinner guy. I mean, I eat a very light breakfast usually. I eat in the afternoon when I'm hungry, and and then I eat dinner. I kind of eat dinner a little later than I probably should, but that's just how my cycle is. Um, but I don't overeat. I don't stuff myself till I can't move. I think the majority, a lot of people in this country stuff themselves, like, dinner at 6 o'clock and they eat this massive meal. And then it's like, watch the football game, or whatever. So like and I've always been a mover.
Mm,
Like I don't sit still very long. I can't, I got to be doing something, you know? So I think the constant moving is just something you very slowly as the day progresses. I burn calories too, by
for sure.
yeah, I just can't. I don't sit around. I don't watch TV much. I only watch Seinfeld and MASH. That's the only thing I ever watch. My wife doesn't like that so much. She's a little over it. But
Seinfeld's still my favorite show of all time.
it'll
I'm
never it
I'm
never.
quoting it. I still quote it, and nowadays nobody knows what the heck I'm talking about.
No, I know what you're talking about. I'll tell you that because I watch it all the time. But yeah, I mean, I don't sit still until till like the very end of the night when go to bed. Maybe I'll catch an episode or something like that. But I really don't. And I watch golf because I love playing golf. I'm a
Mm,
pretty decent player,
mm,
not great player, but decent.
mm.
And that's I can do that. That's the only time I really sit down.
So, what do you coach your athletes? If you're coaching someone, do you do you ever talk about? Surely you talk about nutrition, but do you ever talk about their weight? Do you ever talk about you might be better shedding some pounds, and here's how you should probably do that?
Well, yes, I mean, but that's not really. I mean, I'm not a nutritionist, so for me to say, well, this is what you need to eat to lose this weight. But if someone hires me and they'll say, well, they weigh 230, okay, and I'll look at that. So if someone says they weigh 230 and they're 5'10" or 6 feet or 6'2" or whatever, I can say, okay, well, that's this person's body type. I like them to send me a picture of them running if they have one.
Mm,
It's get an idea of like genetics, like what someone looks like. But yeah, I mean, it can be in the discussion sometimes to lose some weight. I think most people know or realize that, hey, I should probably lose 20 pounds. But one of my comical comments would be like, well, it's good to lose 20 pounds. So do this for a couple of days. Put 20 pounds on your back and run with 20 pounds on your back for a couple of weeks and see how that feels. And then lose 20 pounds and be like, wow, I mean, it's just going to be easier because there's less stress on your body with the pounding. There's so many benefits to it.
mm.
But there's always a fine line of like, would you be comfortable at 140? Probably not. You
Yeah,
tell me, right? I mean,
well, I haven't been 140 since high school, since early,
right,
since like I was
right,
14, probably 14 or 15.
right. I mean, that's just you have to find your comfortable zone.
Mm,
There's some runners out there like that are kind of bigger that that's what their that's what their comfort is. If you lose too much weight, you're sort of depleting yourself. You have to find what your comfort zone is.
right.
For me, it's the 140, 145. For you, it might be 165, 170, whatever.
Yeah.
For Jim, guy like Killian Jornet, he only weighs like 130.
I was about to say, but when you're sitting there talking about like, the
Right.
elite guys, it seems like they're more like you. They
Yeah,
shed.
they're smaller. Yeah, and if you and you look at the Kenyans when you see them running in a race, right? They kind of look strong and built, but the dudes weigh 130 pounds. They're small, right?
They're
Generally
tiny.
speaking, they're smaller people. Every once in a while, you'll see a guy that's fast. A guy like Francois Dane, UTMB winner a few times. He's like 6'3". He's taller.
Mm,
He's a little bigger. Dylan Bowman is a little bigger than most of us, and he's really fast. But it's rare because we're carrying less weight. It's like strength to weight ratio, right?
mm, mm-hmm,
I'm not carrying any of my bulk weight is not above my waist. My strength is all from my waist down.
mm-hmm.
So I'm not carrying all that extra 20 pounds on my back. It's that's just a genetic thing. You can't hide. Your body will gain weight and lose weight how it does for the most part. I mean, a good diet is obviously better than not. If you're going to go eat a quarter pounder with cheese every day, you're going to gain some weight. But I mean, for me, it's like trying to eat whole foods, trying to eat a good diet, trying to stay away from fat and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and things that make you sluggish. But generally speaking, I don't get too crazy with my own personal diet. Because I like to live my life and not,
Sure.
I mean, you live once, man. I'm not trying to live to be 120. I know I'm not going to make it to 120.
Yeah.
As long as I'm happy doing what I'm doing, then I'm not going to worry about it so much.
Karl, you're living life. You've got a lot of freedom. It seems like you can
Yeah.
kind of do what you want to do, and you choose to run. You choose to enter races and train and just run all the time. What do you? I mean, what do you do? I've read some stuff where you listen to jam bands or something like
Mhm.
that in your
Yeah.
ears, or what do you do while you're on trail, or what do you do while you're putting in all these miles? You just listen to music?
Yeah, I mostly listen to music. Sometimes I don't anymore, but I discovered listening to music in, I mean, when I, not the first Watch Touch 100, I didn't listen to music then, but I think once I put it in, I was like, this is kind of fun. It was back to the Sony Walkman days. Well, it's funny, you laugh, but
No, I'm right there with it. I'm 44, so
right, right,
I'm
not
not
too far
50,
behind
but
you.
yeah.
In 2001, when I ran Hard Rock, I had a Sony Walkman clipped onto my waist belt, which didn't even have auto reverse for the cassette. So I could reach back there, flip it, turn it around without even looking at it, hit another 35 minutes of music, then turn it around again.
Right.
It graduated from that to the CD player, to the mini CD player, to the iPod,
Uh,
to the iPod Shuffle, which was the greatest thing ever. Now we're back to the phone because everybody has their phone. Now I got to carry a phone to listen to music. But on the trail, generally, I'm listening to music for the most of the time. It's just kind of, all kinds of thoughts go through your head,
mhm.
thinking about my next project. Like a typical day for me is I'll wake up, I have a couple dogs. I'll walk my dogs for an hour or so, and that kind of gets the body moving, eat breakfast. I'll go do my workout run, and that could be anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. I usually don't run more than 3 hours. Um, and that could be in the mountains again. And then the rest of the afternoon, I'll do my coaching stuff. That usually takes a couple hours. That varies, but it takes a few hours. And then the evenings, I like to build things, move things around. Just it's just stuff around the house, I guess. And I just moved to Colorado in a new home, so
Mhm.
we're when you buy a new house, you get all kinds of projects, right? So
Right.
I've been working on a lot of that stuff lately. I like to play golf, like I said. So in the summertime, I'll play golf a couple times a week. But generally speaking, that's 90% of my life. But I'm pretty happy with that. I don't need any special. I don't really care so much about, making a ton of money, because I can sustain on what I do and on what I have.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people should learn from that it's not so much about training, saving your money for your retirement, because you can't die with it, right? You can't take it with you. So, there's this phrase of he who dies with the most toys wins. And I don't believe that. I think he who dies with nothing left wins because he used it all.
So
Right? I
makes more
mean,
sense to me.
yeah, I mean, sort of, I mean, to a point, of course, but uh but I'm just going to keep doing what I like to do, and sometimes that might sound selfish, but I don't really look at it that way. I think I look back at a lot of my high school friends and my college friends and just friends in general that they still live in Manchester, New Hampshire.
Mm.
And this is not taking anything away from them. They're all friends and all that, but a lot of them will say, "Well, I wish I would have moved out west," or "I wish I could move." I'm like, "Well, you still can."
Right.
Like a lot of people will move to a place because they got hired. Say, they moved to Kansas City or whatever because they got this job, but they don't like living in Kansas City. All they like is
Yeah. The
making
money.
making the money, right? I went to some place to be a ski bum. I didn't care what my job was going to be. I wanted to ski. And then I figured, well, I'll find out what I'm really going to do for work or whatever later. I'm going to ski first. And a lot of people that I met at Snowbird that did that very thing, a lot of us found a way to make it work. I mean, I know the two owners of backcountry.com. They're good friends of mine. One of them passed away, rest in peace, John. And then the owner of Cool Clothing was at Snowbird. And those another huge, massive company. Those guys were ski bums with me. I skied all the time, but they found what worked for them. And then they went on to do those guys made big things happen. But
Mm.
I didn't make big things happen, but I'm as happy as they are, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like I said, I've always said to people, like, if I'm complaining about something, just slap me because I live in a dream world. And I'm not gonna I'm just this is the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, I get to, Hoka has been an amazing sponsor for me and company to work with. The shoe is one thing, but at the same time, that happened randomly and it changed my life. It really
Mm.
did change my life. Um, but that just, I think if you just find your passion, what you really like to do, and hopefully in theory the money or will follow. Somehow
Right.
you'll make it work through your passion. And I've been able to do that. So it's like, like I said, it's the dream world.
Karl, do you do any besides running, do you do any other kind of training? Do you lift? Do you, and I know you said no speed work, you don't really do that, no need for
Mm.
that. Is there anything you do besides running and getting that elevation in?
No, not really.
Yeah.
Like with lifting, you say like I do run hard once in a while. I mean, that's to me, it's not really technically speed work, like you go into a track, but I think getting your cardio higher occasionally is going to help you overall. So it's not, I'm not saying I just slog around all the time. So I mean, I work at it. But I don't really pick the days I do that for now. I sort of like when my body's feeling good, when things are right, I'll
Yeah.
turn up the notch a little bit, you know. But I don't really enjoy lifting, so I don't do it, you know. I don't think I'm not saying it won't help you running, but I really think a lot of times we'll say, people will ask, well, I need to do strength training and get my hips and my glutes stronger so I can run better on the trails. I said, well, maybe, but if you want to get better run on the trails, you need to get on the
Get on the
trails.
trail.
You need to how to learn to run on the rocks on the technical stuff, and that's where you'll gain time again relative to the field.
Yes.
It's just the truth. I mean, if you're just going to run on the pavement all the time, it might be a little different. But if you want to be good in the hills and the trails, you need to get on them.
Yes.
I don't care what else you do; it's not going to make you better. The proprioception of where to put your foot and all that kind of stuff, you learn that over time.
Yes.
So, and that's all I've done all my life. Like good at cross country in high school, and I just carried it over to the mountains later.
It's a simplistic approach, but it seems like it's the obviously it's worked for you, but it seems like
Yeah.
it's the right approach. You want to get better and faster at doing this, then do it. Just do it more.
Well,
And but
simplicity. I mean,
yeah,
keeping it simple. Another good example is you go to some big races and people bring a crew of 6 people. No one needs a crew of 6 people. Two is the max. Okay, like because if you have 6 people, they're all asking you questions. You're doing okay. How's your foot? And what did and you're like, well, now you just wasted time asking me all these questions. So like the simplicity factor is so much easier to control. And I've done so many races where, like, my wife didn't go to Arkansas. My wife didn't go to the Coldwater 100 I ran in January either. I
mm,
just went in my car. I slept in my car. I woke up. I ran a race. I drove back home. I just drove 19 and a half hours straight after the race in Arkansas. I slept 11 hours beforehand. So, but I drove 1,240 miles in 19 and a half hours straight back home. That was because I wanted to beat the storm. But the simplicity of it is the whole thing.
yeah,
If I would have flown there, I would have had a hotel. I had to get a car. I had to get this. I had to go to the grocery store. I had to do all the things. It was
yeah,
all in my car.
right.
So it was simple. I just like the simple approach.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. And that's the thing for me. It makes a lot of sense. I've first I got involved in triathlon, so that
Mhm.
there's a lot of moving pieces with triathlon because
Right.
you're talking about three disciplines and where I realized I didn't love it pretty quick, but I did kind of like you, where let me just go achieve this thing real quick. I
Hmm.
want to achieve this now that I've done it like an Ironman and things like that. I want to focus more. I really enjoy the trail.
Hmm.
Um, what motivates you today? I heard, I watched the Red Bull, the documentary on the AT,
Hmm.
and I heard either I can't remember if you said it or someone in the documentary said that what really I don't know if motivates the right word, but what really kind of gets you going is to see someone else suffer and overcome that suffering and overcome that pain.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure if I said, it might have been Eric or my dad that said that, but it's overcoming obstacles. And Ian Torrance, another fantastic ultra runner I've known forever, he once said, ultra running is about managing issues.
Mm,
And that's the thing. When you see someone suffer and then overcome that, that's super satisfying. I mean, it's like I've had bad races where I've struggled at the end, but I kind of laugh at myself. And now I laugh when that happens. I'm like, oh, here we go. Now I'm bonking. Oh, what's going on? Um, I like to see success come from failure. Does that make sense? Like
yeah,
failure always leads to greater success. I think that's something that's true. It's just about anything in life. It doesn't matter what you're
mhm,
doing. And with the Speed Goat 50K races, like I like to watch people will suffer. I made that race really hard. But the satisfaction on those people's faces when they finish the line, they're like, what the hell
Yes.
was that? Or that was crazy, Karl, you're a nut, you're a freak. But those moments are the ones that are the reason I still do it.
Mm.
Like people, they like to do hard things. At least ultra runners like to do hard things. And it's amazing to see people be successful at it. And if I'm the person that sort of like has motivated them to do that, and then I mean, I guess I've succeeded in what I'm trying to do.
When you get towards the end of a race and you're obviously in a lot of pain, especially in the early days,
Yeah.
and you're able to dig deep and find some other gear and make it to the finish and in a lot of cases win the thing. Where did that come from? Do you always have that? Where did that extra gear come from?
Well, going back to what I said earlier, like I learned things the hard way, right? I've always learned to push through. I mean, when I was young, like a young kid, I learned to ski when I was 3. And my dad brought me skiing every weekend in Vermont for until basically till I got into high school when I started doing things with my friends. In high school, I didn't ski as much then, but when I was younger, we went out skiing when it was 0 degrees,
Mm.
and it was just like, suck it up, Buttercup. My dad didn't say that to me, but at the same time, it was like, I learned how to like, oh, it's cold. I guess I got to deal with this, and I learned how to deal with those issues of skiing when it's really cold, or skiing when it was even raining or snowing hard, or icy conditions or whatever it was. My dad had a huge role in my life like that. So that maybe that transpired over like the AT. I mean, the AT is ridiculously hard.
Mm.
Um, but every day when you finally stop, you're like, okay, I busted through that day, get me to bed. Um, learning how to get through things instead of just giving up it's not in my vocabulary. Giving up is not in my vocabulary. I've dropped out of many races, and those races I regret every one of them.
Mm.
And even when you drop out, my wife will always say, "You're going to regret this." And I'm like, "I know, I don't care." Rah, rah, rah. And then I go home. And then the next day, yeah, I regret it, of course. Um, but now as I've gotten older and I'm really not racing yeah, I won last weekend, but it's a small race. I'm not going to race the front at big races. I can't do that anymore.
Mm.
But it's still the satisfaction of finishing and busting through it every
Yeah.
time. It doesn't have to be your fastest race anymore. Now I'm chasing those 100-mile, 100 finishes. I'm getting closer. I got 82. And so now I sort of have a different focus, but I kind of like that focus, like 18 is still a daunting number to finish hundreds, right? But I think in a couple of years I'm going to get there. Hoka will support me. They're standing behind me on that one,
Mm.
which is really cool because how many 56-year-olds are still getting paid to run? Probably not many. So that's been another thing. It's like staying on the team actually is a bit motivating too,
Mm.
because if Hoka says, okay, you're too old or too young, and all my sponsors say, well, you're out, Karl, you're washed up or whatever, my motivation might go down a little. But it's not about trying to sell a product. It's just kind of about, thank you for the support. I'm going to keep doing this. That's been a really cool thing for me over the years. And I can't thank them, all the companies, Drymax, UltraSpire, Person Endurance, all that sponsored me all the years. They've stood behind me the whole time. And that's definitely a motivator too. It's a bummer. Like someday will come when, God, thank God I have to buy a pair of shoes. But right. But I've got plenty stocked up. But at that point, that's going to feel kind of weird. I haven't been to a shoe store in like 30 years.
Right.
But
Well, how many did you go through on the AT? In the documentary,
I,
you just see like a big picture of it, but how many did you go through? You had to go through 10 at least.
19. Well, and those were the Speed Goat ones too, and the 2016 one was Speed Goat ones. So, um, the reason I went through so many is not that they failed after. It was about every 3 days or so that I went through a pair, roughly 2 or 3 days. But the fresh pair was always nice, you know, and
Mm.
I had the opportunity to have that. So I kept using a fresh pair often.
But the rocks had to have cut them up.
Oh, Pennsylvania is ridiculous. In 2 days, Pennsylvania, the shoes were trashed. New Hampshire, Maine, New Hampshire, even Vermont, same thing, trash. But then you get to some place like Virginia, which is butter for a lot of
Yeah.
it, it lasts a little longer, but yeah, 19 pairs was a lot. But again, it was mostly because it was just nice to put on a fresh. It's kind of like the day I remember hearing a long, long time ago when I was a kid that, Shaquille O'Neal always wears a fresh pair of shoes every game. Well, of course he does, Shaquille O'Neal, right? But you're able to have that opportunity. Why not use it?
Yeah, for sure.
So it was. I mean, it was when I did the 18 2008. Um, I probably only went through maybe 6 or 7 pair, and that was when I was with La Sportiva,
Mm.
and they weren't supplying me, endless boxes of shoes either. They're like, okay, you take this pair for another next 600 miles. It's like, okay, you know, um, but I had the opportunity, so it's stupid not to take it.
Yeah. I mean, just I had an opportunity like about a year and a half ago to do I high point. I like to hit the highest point in every state, and so
Nice.
I did a northeast trip, and I hit Katahdin,
Yeah.
through Baxter, and then I did Washington, Mount
Yeah.
Washington, and I'm used to these single tracks, these
Right.
smooth night, and I just couldn't. There's no trail. It's just rocks and boulders. I didn't go through Pennsylvania. I've heard Pennsylvania is really
Pennsylvania
bad.
is insane.
Yeah,
It's just because it's all sharp little rocks in
right.
Pennsylvania, and they're just sharp.
There's
And in
there's the
Maine, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I was just gonna say there's a lot of those sharp little rocks in the Smokies through the Smoky Mountains
Yes.
too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, go
Absolutely.
ahead. I'm sorry.
But in Maine, like, so you went up Katahdin. Did you go up Katahdin Stream from?
I couldn't even tell you the name of it. I did not go up the AT part. I came
Okay,
from starts with a B. I'm forgetting it right
I
now.
can't even. There's A Ball. There's the A Ball Trail. But either way,
I went down Cathedral. I remember that,
okay, right,
and I
okay,
went up some Bending Brook or Babbling Brook or
yeah,
something Brook
yeah,
maybe. I can't
yeah.
remember.
I haven't been on that one, but you saw how gnarly it was. So in when I first time I went through Maine, I on the 18 2008, and backcountry.com was a sponsor then. I hadn't been on the trail really. I looked at the maps and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And every day when I went through the trail, I was like, I don't think they ever really built this trail. I think some knucklehead started walking through the woods, put a white blaze on the trail on the tree or something, and people just started following it, and that's how the trail was built
Right.
because it is so gnarly. It's you just can't move very fast. I mean, the trail on Katahdin is pretty well traveled, but it's still gnarly. And you go further south in southern Maine, southern and western Maine, the Mahoosucs, the Bigelows, my Sugarloaf, my Saddleback,
Mm.
all those areas are insanely rooty and rocky and hard. Like if you average 2.5 miles an hour, you're flying,
Yeah.
and that's slow. You know, it's really really hard. And then you went to Mount Washington, you saw that. I mean, that's all that
Ridiculous.
ridiculous, and that gnarly stuff basically ends for the most part ends after you go over Moosilauke Mountain in New Hampshire. So you're about 70 miles from the New Hampshire Vermont border, and then it kind of calms down a little
Mm.
bit. But all the way to that point, it's about 350 miles of that gnarly stuff, and it's just like, what is this? Switchback. What's a switchback? They
Right.
don't know what a switchback is. So that trail is it's by hands down my favorite trail ever. I love
The
it.
AT?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's so diverse, it's so well known, it's so hard. There's no bullshit. It's like follow the blazes, buddy. Nothing's going to be easy.
Mm.
And I grew up in New Hampshire, so I did hiking on that trails in Franconia a lot, and just that's what I learned. That's what I knew about. That's what I knew of a trail when I was young was like Franconia Ridge, which is like Katahdin. So when stuff got easier, down south, it was easy. Well, it wasn't easy, don't get me wrong, but it was easier, you know.
Well, or there's a trail. There's an actual
There's actually a
trail.
trail, right?
Right.
Right. Yeah, no, it's yeah. And then when you talk about Pennsylvania, that's basically from the glaciated days, it's all like these piles, it's just like a pile of rocks,
Mm.
And it's not that the hills are really big climbs or anything, but they're just sharp rocks and you can't it's really hard to run on. It just throws you all over the place. So that's a slow moving area too. For flat, it's not flat, but for flatter section, you just can't move very fast either.
So you've mentioned a couple of times, that you graduated to this, then you did this, then you did this, and then you mentioned just a second ago about you got 1800s left to get to 100. That's another achievement. Have you found that you need that next thing to keep you really going and motivated, or is it just you don't need that motivation anymore?
I don't need motivation to get out in the mountains every day. I think that's just, whether or not I run a race. I mean, I do like to have, like, I don't need to sign up for a race 10 months in advance to say I'm motivated to do that race. That doesn't bother me. But yeah, I mean, to have the 100, it's a pretty massive milestone. So for an elite runner, as I was, back in the day, no elite runner has ever finished 100 hundreds. There's been about 30 people that have done it,
Mm.
but none of those have won 50 of them or anything like that. So that's sort of like a milestone. Um, I think it's good to have a goal,
Hmm.
getting out in the mountains every day is not a problem. I mean, I would do that anyway, but the goal of 100 hundreds is definitely keeping me motivated to kind of stay on the team, like I said, and to kind of like inspire others to do crazy things. I mean, it's amazing how much, with social media, how that is these days. Um, People are pretty crazy. They're like, oh my God, this guy's done this, he's done that. I'm just like, I just go out and run, do
Right.
my thing. But it's cool to inspire other people. And like you said about Goggins, like he's inspired so many people, probably a lot more than I have in a slightly different realm. But it's always an honor when someone says, "Hey, man, I started running because of you," or "I did the
Hmm.
AT because of you." And I'm thinking, like, dude, I'm just some knucklehead in Colorado, just running around the woods.
Right.
Um, but that's been really cool to live the life like that, and people say that to you. I mean, I've been spotted in airports, which is weird. um, it's cool to help people out.
So I asked that question because you were sitting here talking about, I do high points. I like to travel around. I love the Grand Canyon. I go to the
Yeah,
Grand Canyon and run rim to rim to rim. That's
yeah,
like one of my favorite things to do. Have you ever
that's
done that
awesome.
by chance?
Oh, I've done that 3 times. Yeah, yeah,
What's
it's
so
incredible.
so and I don't know all the names in the sport, but what's the guy's name? Is it Jim?
Jim
Uh,
Walmsley,
he's got like the FKT on that.
under 6 hours. I did.
It's
Yeah,
insanity.
that is so fast.
I can barely do rim to rim in the amount of time he did the whole thing, like there and back.
I did it in 7:56 round trip, I think. That was a long time ago. My dog was waiting in the car. He loved the car, so it was fine. He was back of a truck. But yeah, I did it in 7:56, and then a few years later, that wasn't the record at the time. It was I didn't break the record. It was like 7:40 or something. And then Dave Mackey ran it in 6:57. This was again years ago. Dave Mackey, another fantastic, amazing ultra runner. 6:57. That was like, oh my word, Mac Daddy did it in 6:57. That's ridiculous. And then someone did it in 6:20, and then Jim ran under 6 hours. And I know Jim. Um, he's incredible. I mean, his history is a little bit, his best 5K is 13:52.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so boo, that's pretty fast. So he has that internal speed too.
Hmm.
This might be a time you need speed work to run that fast across the Grand. But that time is insane. That's one of the greatest FKTs on earth. Absolutely. And Zach Miller chased it last year and he almost got it. He wasn't far off it. He was right around 6 or 6:05 or something. Those two guys are incredible. Um, yeah, that FKT is,
That's
it's like
it just
it's
blows
just
my mind.
I know. It's like Killian's Matterhorn up and down. And I've been over to Zermatt before. And to see that from town in Zermatt for Killian to run up and down that, which is very technical up there,
Hmm.
in 3 hours,
Hmm.
good Lord, that's just like, what, huh? Yeah, there's things are being done these days that by this generation of ultra runners and mountaineers that are so off the charts, um, so much faster than I, ever did in my height of my career. Like when I broke Hard Rock record, I ran 26:39 that one year. No one's ever going to touch that, blah, blah, blah. And now the record is 21:35, 5 hours faster. right? Right. And every year someone wins Hard Rock in 23-ish, around there.
Mm,
So the times have changed.
yeah,
Nutrition has changed. I'm sure training has changed for some of those people.
right.
And just like any other sport, whether it's basketball or football. Remember when the refrigerator, he was Chicago Bears, he weighed
I'm
300, right? He weighed 300 pounds. He was the biggest guy ever. They all weigh 300 pounds now,
mm,
right? Bigger, better, faster. LeBron James is a lot bigger than Michael Jordan.
yeah,
The guy's a house, right? I mean,
yeah,
people just get bigger and stronger, and I think
yeah,
that's going to be the continuing trend. It's just how it is, just how evolution, but how the world works.
yeah. Well, I asked you about Grand Canyon because you're doing all the races. You've won all these races. You want to do 100 hundreds. Do you ever just go and do something like travel to a place because I want to climb that mountain, or I want to go rim to rim to rim at the Grand Canyon because I saw someone else do it and I might want to do something like that? Do you ever do anything like that? We don't really hear about those kinds of things.
Right. I haven't done something like that in quite a while. I think I like the race better than the FKT, with the exception of the AT. But
Well,
no,
I'm not even necessarily talking about an FKT. I'm just talking about something, you run in the mountains because you enjoy doing that every day and it's good,
right.
obviously good training for you too. But would you ever just travel to somewhere? I want to travel here because I want to see that and run that or hike that or
Yeah.
something.
Well, I did a couple years ago. You saw the film Made to Be Broken. The guy with the beard, Eric Bell's my crew person.
Mhm.
He and I went back to Vermont and did the Long Trail together.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so that was a travel to do something cool. It was 19 days. I wasn't trying to go fast. We did about 13 miles a day, kind of like the normal folk does.
Wow,
Okay.
that was probably painful for
It
you.
was, well, the long trail is like Maine and New Hampshire, so it's hard.
Yeah.
Where they converge, it gets a little easier, but the north part of the long trail is brutal.
Mm,
But it wasn't about the speed. It was about we woke up in the morning when we got up,
mhm,
and we put our shit together when we got going. And Eric was a little slower than I was, but that's fine. I just stopped and waited for him. And we'd finished our day at like 3 o'clock, and we hung out and shot the shit with other people. And that was like one of the best trips ever because there was no pressure to go faster or anything. It's
mm.
just, if I waited for him for a little while, I sat up on a ridge and hung out, like that's what we wanted to do. We stayed in a hotel 4 nights.
I was gonna ask you because in that documentary it mentioned that you hated the camping or you didn't really like sleeping in the tent or something like that.
Well, I like back I go backpacking. I like backpacking. So
Okay.
I like that. I think when I did the AT, it was better for me to, at least at the time, it was better to just have that support with the van. My van was pretty simple in 2016, the inconspicuous white van is what we called it. But I like, now the record is 41 days and change. And Karel Saab, who has the record, he camped on the trail a lot. And that's the more efficient way to do it. But I did like sleeping in comfort. I think that helped me because I did get 8 hours, just about 8 hours of sleep every night.
Mm.
I mean, that's important when you're going 45 days like that. You got to sleep. Scott Jurek, he was a little slower moving on the trail, and that dude he slept 4 or 5 hours a night. And I mean, that to me, that was amazing because I could never do that.
Mm.
Um, but I definitely like sleeping in a tent. I just wasn't getting enough rest. It wasn't good for me to do it that way. So I
Right.
just did it my own way.
Is there a place you feel like you still want to go, or just leisurely or casually, like a place, a destination you'd like to travel to, and maybe climb some mountains, or just do something leisurely?
Um,
I feel like this is a painful question for you.
it's a hard question because there's so many. I've been a lot of places, but I wouldn't mind going back to the Alps. I
Mm,
mean, and just going hut to hut for like a couple of weeks, with my wife, and just because that's sort of the luxury tour, hut to hut. Don't get me
mhm,
wrong. I mean, you can sit down and have a nice meal and glass of wine and all that stuff every night if you want. You pay for it, but that would be pretty rad because those mountains are above and beyond anything in this country.
mhm.
Um, the you know the altitude of them is about the same as Colorado Rockies, but the valleys are deeper. So you have bigger
Wow,
climbs. They're steeper. Like the base of Chamonix is only 2,500 feet. Top of Mont Blanc is 15.
wow.
So when you pull around the corner into Cham, You see 13,000 feet of relief in front of you, and it's like, whoa, it's pretty big. Like in Utah, there was 7,000 feet of relief from my house at the Wasatch, but double that, right? So they're just bigger. I mean, walking, traveling around the Alps and the culture out there is so special for someone coming from the land of strip malls and it's yeah, strip malls. Um, it's so different, and it's everybody's that we've met over there when we traveled around. Everyone's super nice, and when I traveled over there before, first from Mont Blanc, my wife and I went to Germany, and we went to Switzerland for a week and a half before we ran the race. Before I ran the race, and we had no itinerary, we had no hotel reservations anywhere, nothing. We just looked at a map and I said, "Let's go there, and we'll find a place to sleep."
Right.
And that was the coolest kind of trip because it was so off piste, like you go to the resort towns, everyone speaks English. You go to the small towns, not many people speak English. So it made it better, in my opinion, because it was really cool. I'd love to go back to the Alps again.
Yeah.
And I could do that. I could totally do that. I just have to like make the plans and go.
Yeah.
But that place is really cool. And the other thing I'd like to do is go to Ireland or and play golf for a couple weeks because I love golf and that's like the old history and the courses are kind of different.
Yeah.
And that's just something I like to do too.
Yeah, for sure. Have you ever done anything like climb Rainier or Mount
I
Hood
haven't.
or
No, I haven't. I'm not really a mountaineer, so I mean that. I mean, I could. Of course, I could hire a guy and go up Rainier. I know I could do it.
yeah.
I don't have quite that experience. Does that? Do I want to do that? I'd rather run around Rainier on the Wonderland Trail. I
Have you
haven't
ever
done
done
that
that?
yet.
You've never
That's
done
another. I can totally do that. I mean, it's 93 miles, and I know a lot of people that have done it. So that could be on my radar too. But some of those things, like just climbing to the high point, is especially if it's technical, it's really not my thing.
Mm,
I'm not afraid of exposure, but I'm not a big fan of exposure.
yeah.
So, I mean, I live in the San Juans in Southwest Colorado now, and looking out my window, I can pretty much see Mount Snuffles, which is a 14er, right out my door here, and there's class 3 scramble at the top of that. That's probably about my max in terms of like how technical I want it to be. I'm just not that guy.
Yeah.
Um, that's why I like to respect even more guys like Killian and even the late Uli Steck, like some guys like that. What they've done in the world of alpinism is just, I mean, it's insane. The places they put themselves in, the positions they put themselves in, that's just not for me.
Right.
But we all have our thing.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. And Carl, thank you for, taking the time. I know you said you're still recovering and stuff, but what's on tap for you for 2024?
Well, we've got in 4.5 weeks, I've got another 100, which is Antelope Island near Salt Lake. My other home is in Salt Lake, so that's convenient. And then Hellbender 100 is you probably heard of that one. It's in North Carolina. Fantastic course,
Hmm.
May 12th. Hard Rock is after that. Um, and then again, chasing the 100 right? So
Right.
Ute 100, Stagecoach 100, and then Rim to River, and then something in December will give me 9 for this year, if my body stays intact. Right.
What's Rim to River?
Rim to River's in West Virginia, New River Gorge. I haven't run it before, but I know I've heard such a great course. So
Hmm.
these days I'm sort of seeking out. I don't care if it's a big race or small race. I'm seeking out the cool courses,
Yeah.
and that I've heard is a great, fantastic course. A friend
Awesome.
of mine ran last year, and he's like, "You need to do that one." So, so that one it filled up in 10 minutes. um, but yeah, that's my lineup for this year. And other than that, just to tool around my house and get projects done.
Are you any plans or any thoughts about possibly come back to Alabama?
Maybe Pinhoti will always sort of be like on a radar. Todd Henderson puts a race on. He'll always kind of let me in, which is very nice. I don't ever ask for favors like that, but Pinhoti's a great race, and I can see myself running that race again for sure.
So this year we have a Southern States 200.
Yeah, I do know of that one.
I know 200 is not really your niche. Would you
Yeah,
ever
and
consider doing something like that? Coming back to Alabama to do
um,
something like that?
I'm going to say no. um, but a lot of people have asked me that question. When are you going to do 200? When are you going to do 200? And Jeff Browning asked me that same question, and Jeff's done a couple now. And I just like, I don't want to put myself, I don't think I want to do a 200, I mean, I heard enough after 100. I mean, maybe after, well, the thing is, maybe after I finish 100 hundreds,
Yeah.
maybe that's when I'll do it. But, it's okay, different challenge. I've accomplished this other goal. Maybe that would be the time. But I think in the near future, probably not, because I know it'll wreck me to get to that 100 hundreds first.
Right.
So that's
Right.
kind of like my thought process on that. Um, it is intriguing. I mean, Moab, I know Moab 240. I know all the trails. I've run there a million times. I know it.
That's that is just like going 240 in Moab. Whew.
And I know the route. I mean, I pretty much know most of the route. It's not really a hard route in terms of like elevation gains and stuff like that, but it's
Mhm.
still 240 miles. Welcome to my dog. Sorry.
No, it's
Um,
all,
yeah. It just isn't intriguing to me quite yet. That's all.
do you think that this sport is just going to keep? There's going to be a 300. There's going to end up being a 500 one day. I mean,
Well, there
is it?
are. I mean, if you go to, I mean, in this country, there aren't as many longer races. I mean, Candace Burt, who started the 200s a bit, she kind of got it going. And then if you go over to Europe, the Europeans are crazy, man. Those guys, there's the Swiss Peaks 360. And over Swiss Peaks, it climbed 140,000 vertical feet. And the Swiss are nuts. But there's races in Europe like that we haven't really tapped into yet. But I mean, they're out there if you want them. It's just that they're not as popular because it's a really, really small niche group that are doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you're not seeing it on TV. You don't even hear about it. But there are some in the Alps that, like
Wow.
those Swiss are nuts, man. They're not afraid. The Tour de Gens, I mean, that race, that's my friend. I have some friends that have done that one too, and they're like, "You got to go do that one." I'm like, I don't think I'm there yet.
Yeah.
It's just hard. But
Yeah.
they're out there. They're coming. I think they're coming. I don't think there's any doubt that they're coming.
Yeah. Well, Carl, thank you. Get better, heal up, and rest up, and can't wait to see you out on the trail. Hopefully, I'll get to enter a race that you're in and meet you in person one day. I
Yeah, it'd
appreciate
be
the time.
great. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. And feel free to reach out anytime for anything. It's all good.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carl.
All
Have a
right.
great
Have a
day.
good day, Brian.
See
Yep.
you.
See you later.